Okay, for people joining this live stream, this is an incremental language development meeting, and we are looking at functions that are in the Wolfram function repository that we want to consider versions of as part of our main system. All right, so let's keep going. Boy, why is this in this weird code font? Whatever.
Yeah, unfortunately, yeah, this time.
Okay, whatever happened to the function directory block, which I was keen on?
I think we have a ticket for it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because the other function that I think maybe is a better version is with directory or something. I mean, in other words, it's like temporarily set this as the directory.
Mm-hmm.
See what I'm saying?
Yeah. I see. It's a set directory that at the end recovers the original.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Boy, where should I put this? Should we start a section about function repository?
That's a good idea. We've saved similar things in just the general ILD folder. And then there's also miscellaneous, but that's kind of a cop-out.
No. Okay. I mean, alternatively, directory block, which I think was the same idea.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. File queue. Why isn't that file exists queue? I thought we already had something like that. What's the difference between file queue and file exists queue?
I honestly don't remember, other than there is a difference. This is probably a Rick Hennigan function.
It's not. It's a tally production.
Oh.
If path exists and is an ordinary file, maybe this is a duplicate. Okay. Well, check that out.
Queue does not check if it's an ordinary file, right?
Say again? You sound like you're in a cave, by the way.
So the difference with file exists queue is that it doesn't test if the file is an ordinary file.
As opposed to a directory.
For example.
Maybe file exists queue should have a second argument that says that.
Well, that's one way to present this.
Seems like the right thing to do, because I can imagine several different choices for, what you want. That's what I think we should do.
Okay.
All right, ensure file paths. Boy. We don't have a mechanism for that?
It seems there is this option, create intermediate directories. So perhaps it's a matter of propagating that option.
Right, I don't quite understand the point of this. I think this needs more study.
Well, the note, what the note means is that we're not necessarily recommending it as a standalone function, but that the functionality might be incorporated into export.
Well, that I think is worthwhile. That makes sense to me. I agree with that. Okay. This one, again, I don't really know, but We should determine that.
Yeah, we weren't sure if this was covered already.
Well, directory size would be directory byte count if it was anything.
Yes,
and that's not obviously wrong. That's not obviously a bad idea, because
No.
I think that would be actually be quite useful, and a recursive directory byte count would be even more useful.
Well, allow people to say -R.
Mm-hmm.
We have an internal version of this function. I think it should be.
The implementation, by the way, Jose, might well be that internal version.
Oh, I see. Okay.
I don't
Okay,
know.
but so file byte count, it doesn't make sense to allow that to be recursive, to give it an option to allow it to be recursive. It makes more sense to just say, because the file byte count of a directory is just the directory itself, right?
I would expect so.
Probably. I would expect 1K typically.
Right. Okay. I think directory byte count is a sensible thing to have. Oh boy. Yeah, well, that's a good idea, but I'm not sure we have the right. Do we have the right people here to discuss that in detail?
No. It's a suggestion to take in that direction next.
I agree. Close cell groups in a notebook by style. That's a cool function. That's a cool idea. Whether that's something that should be in a function versus something in the cell menu is less clear to me.
Well, you do want a programmatic way to do it, I think.
I agree that I've needed that a bunch of times. I didn't know it was in the function repository. I mean, the typical way you would do it is close cell groups on another, on another notebook, on a notebook, symbolically specified notebook, right?
I would think that would be the use case for the function version, as opposed to a cell menu.
Well, I see. This is interesting. That does it on the actual current notebook.
Well, there's no reason you can't do that.
No, I understand. It's just a little weird. I mean, it's okay. You can do that, and then you delete the cell, and then your notebook is just the way it should be. Do we have anybody from the front end team here?
No, I don't think so.
I'm just suspecting, So this leaves open. So in principle, I could give this a list. I could say section and subsection. Then it will close up those two levels. Now, this is actually a useful function. Well, I like this function. I'm not completely certain this is the right packaging of it.
Question for Lou, maybe, and John?
I think so. Yeah, I think so. But I like it. It's a good idea. That one seems iffy. I'm not sure why we care about this one as a built-in. Right, common. What's the difference between these? Oh.
Yeah, they're opposites, I guess. I don't really remember why we thought those were worthwhile.
I think those are very iffy. Sort the characters in a string. I I mean, it's amusing. I don't think it's I mean, to me, that name is not clear enough as whether that means that the string crushed into characters is this joint versus the string as given, you know, like AAABBB versus, you know, BBAA. Disjoint as in, can they be overlaid on each other? I mean, that's a string overlaps thing.
Right.
Yeah.
So,
This
I mean,
exactly
they have
is-
an overlap. Maybe
Yeah.
I'm not sure what you're saying.
What time?
Maybe I'm not sure what you're saying, but
No, but I mean, if I change the second string to ABAAA, it doesn't have an overlap. Oh, it has an overlap at the beginning.
yeah.
Yeah, okay,
If
fine.
you got one character in common, you have some kind of overlap, right?
One character at the end in common.
Oh, I see. You can place. Yeah, I see what you mean. Yeah, I don't think that.
I don't think this is a big thing.
Okay.
Okay, slugify. Yeah, I tend to think these are quite useful. I mean, they're a little bit wild and woolly, but I think there's a having a curated collection of these things seems useful to me. It's something you want to do. I mean, it's even it's not just URL friendly, it's also file name friendly and things like this. I think we discussed things like this before. Maybe there's a more general name than slugify, and we can have a something string name.
Right.
I don't think this is a good idea to make it part of decapitalize.
Yeah, this is something that can have multiple options with like ignore diacritics and things like that to control.
Right, but this is a different thing. Look, this is a convention for, you know, how to deal with spaces in a name. I don't know whether slugify is really the I don't know where that comes from, the word slug. I think it probably comes from old-fashioned lead type printing or something. But
it will also change capitalization and perhaps remove diacritics. Things that could be potentially confusing.
I would expect it to do all that.
Right. But I think it should be more than just decapitalized, because that's a completely different. Well, but when you, oh, I see. You're doing this. Oh, wait a minute. Are you saying? I just think it's really obscure to have decapitalized be the thing that basically makes it URL friendly.
Right. Decapitalize is just one part of it, and not
What's the difference between decapitalize and to lowercase?
Because decapitalize only has various options for decapitalizing first words, and let me look.
Okay.
The first character has been made lowercase. That's it.
Okay.
Yeah, but this function cannot be responsible for introducing hyphens or.
Right. I mean, I would say this is more like some kind of encode string or something. I don't know. What's the general word for slugify? But I think we should have such a function. I see. I believe in having this function. I just am not sure about its name.
Slugify seems to be the name these days.
Then maybe we should just call it slugify.
Yeah.
Without the string. Decapitalize, slugify. All right, let's study the possibility of slugify.
A slug is a unique string, normalized version of title, often used as part of a URL, and slugify is the process to make it.
Fine. String wrap. No, I don't think we need this in the modern world. I mean, I don't think we need that as a built-in thing.
Okay.
No, I don't know. I mean, maybe I'm wrong, but it certainly is something that's useful. Well, how would you do it? The question is whether to do a more serious kind of wrapping than just chop it with a string partition.
I'm thinking
Is this
that
trying to do word-based wrapping and things? Oh, it is. That's more useful. I agree, that's more useful. I wonder how it works.
we are doing now similar things, not for full texts like here, for geo labels, in which we have countries with very long names, so we have to wrap them, things like that, depending on our maximum length.
Yes, okay, fair enough. Maybe this is a useful thing to have. I mean, I agree that I can see it programmatically being used in labels, for example.
Mhm.
All right, let's look at this. I mean, and the question here, I think, will be, what does the 40 really mean? It's probably like the page width option. Okay, I agree, this is useful. Because, again, yeah, you might very well want to use it in things like labels. Okay, this from camel case, yeah, I mean, I don't know whether that's part of this. I don't think decapitalize is the right place for it. I had thought this is not as trivial a function as it appears. I don't think. I'm trying to think here. Yeah, because you really don't want it to capitalize those words. You really want it to appropriately lowercase those words. So you're taking something which is like a function name or a name of a canonical, a standard name of an entity, and you are decameling it in a way where it ends up with an actual sort of human readable thing at the end. I think there's a more difficult problem. We've talked about using, all kinds of fancy machine learning things for this. I don't think it's, I don't think it's a straightforward structural thing. Does that make sense?
Wait, isn't it just string splitting and then remerging with spaces?
No, because the problem is, if you want to lowercase the things, you have to know what to lowercase. Look, the most common case is something like, take an entity name, some name of a chemical or something. It's got a bunch of camel casing in it. Many of those words should be lowercased. That's the useful instance of this.
There is an easy way of telling string split, to split at capitals.
Not easy. I mean, there's ways to do it, but I don't think it's particularly easy. Yeah. Okay. Well, I'm not sure what to do with this one. I think this one is more complicated than it appears. I think it's a useful function, but I think it's more complicated than it appears. I don't know if this can be done reliably enough. I think that something like this, a general version of this, would be useful. I mean, part of speech queue is
That's what I was actually advocating for in the meeting.
fine. Well, and then, I mean, already part of speech is a function, right?
I guess this is based on that.
Right. So, I mean, this would answer the question, could this be a such and such?
Right.
Not sure how incredibly useful it is, because in a sense, you know, text cases, look, it's probably a harmless thing to have. I mean, obviously it would have to have a language option, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. You know, part of speech queue, fish, noun, language, arrow, English in this case. It's reasonable. It's a reasonable thing to have as part of our suite of linguistics capabilities.
Who works on that stuff?
That'd be me, Nick.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay, key replace. Replace keys in an association. Oh boy. Well, these are actually interesting. Replace keys in an association. So this is saying I can't believe we don't have another way to do that. I mean, we've got key sort and all those kinds of things.
Mm-hmm.
I would have expected key replace, though, to be replace. I see. Key sort sorts on the keys, right?
Right.
Right. I do agree that key replace does seem to be a reasonable thing that seems missing. Now, what happens if key replace maps two keys to the same thing? What happens to the, you know, to the association? Because the association has to have unique keys.
Right, or to an existing key. I would expect whatever comes last wins.
I think this is kind of wacky. I think it should just apply to a particular association that's sitting in front of its nose.
Well,
Maybe.
it defaults.
To everything. Well, maybe that's right, because you want to do it on a data set, for example.
Ah, yeah.
But as far as I remember, usually key functions and association functions are one-dimensional.
I thought so. But I mean, okay, so the question is if it's a, you know, contractive mapping, so to speak, and key replace, you know, maps two keys onto the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
You know, arguably there should be some combiner function in here that determines what to do. I think that's what should happen. Just like we have a combiner function, what are some other cases of this? Where you can map multiple things onto the same key. What's it called? Oh my gosh, what is that operation called? The one where you take
Concatenation? Or
no. Standard database operation.
Some kind of merge?
Oh yeah, join across.
Join.
Or merge. Both of those have the notion of what to do combining it, what to do when you combine identical keys. That's what seems to me key replace has to have. But that's, that seems like a reasonable thing. Map at key. Why isn't that just map at with a symbolic part number? Why don't we generalize map at to work on associations?
But
What's wrong with that idea?
nothing's wrong with it. I don't, other than map at works on places, right?
Exactly.
And
So
we don't, places are implicit other than in associations. So associations would be an outlier in terms of the behavior is uniform for everything, but then there's some specialized stuff for.
well, no, it's like I see what you're saying. You're saying there's a part number here. I could just say part 1 there, and that would do that.
Yeah, that's an ambiguity if you say A and you expect it to operate on the A rather than its value.
Right.
Fair point. That's an argument for map at key. I think that is a somewhat useful function.
Perhaps.
Oh, yeah.
Perhaps it's more like a key map at.
Yeah.
No, because key map at would do the operation on the key.
And isn't that what this is?
Isn't that what it's doing? Map at key?
No. What this is doing is it's saying, take what I'm imagining is.
Oh.
Right. It's saying, take this association and, oh boy, that's even more exotic. Wow, that's exotic. We don't have that for map at.
Oh, this is not what I thought.
Okay, so what I'm imagining this does is that map at key.
What it does appears to be like your extension to map at proposed.
Yeah, right. Of A goes to f of 1.
Yeah.
B goes to 2.
Well, this already works by saying key of A.
In map at.
In Mapat. Yeah.
Oh, well, then we've solved the problem. Okay, then we don't need this.
Okay. Yeah, I thought it was a key map.
Oh, it says, yeah. Oh, never mind.
But it does, the function repository version does multiple cases and so on. By the way, we should probably record these comments somehow in the function repository pages.
Not easy.
What do you mean?
If you're talking about putting them in the documentation.
Well, I'm thinking that we might want a design discussion so that we don't, so first of all, so people who are looking at these don't say, oh, what's the relationship to this thing? Oh, why isn't it the same, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And also, so we don't, in 2 years, come back and look at these again and say, and have to repeat our conversation.
Some of this probably shows up under properties and relations. When the authors or reviewers are savvy enough to realize that there's a need for that.
Yes. Well, I still think it would be useful to record somewhere that we've had the discussion and concluded that
No, Devin's kind of doing that, isn't he?
Perhaps so. I mean, but we need a way to connect these things to the function repository information. Maybe we should just link the appropriate section of the live stream to the function repository page.
Yeah, and like I've been, well, at least starting last time, I've been keeping track of all the timestamps. So
okay, compress with definitions. Well, that's an interesting idea, but I don't know, you know, I don't know the relationship between compress and iconize and all those kinds of things nowadays.
Right. I think both just work at the expression level.
They
without-
do, but I mean, one could imagine an iconize with saved definitions.
Yeah, yeah. Well, that's sort of what is being proposed here, only restricted to compress.
Right. Well, basically a save definitions option to compress.
Yes. I mean, that's what the note is getting at.
Okay. But I mean, I think also the other thing to think about there is a save definitions option to iconize, which I think will be super useful, actually. I also don't know the relation between iconize and compress.
I think one uses the other.
Okay.
I think.
Fine. Then what I recommend is a iconize with saved definitions. I'd not thought of it before, but it's a good idea.
I would not omit compress from that.
No. Compress should also be there.
Yeah.
I mean, one thing I'm wondering about is what actually is the result from a compress with saved definitions? Is it a with?
I am not sure.
Okay. We have some comments on that live stream. Ultra is asking, will there ever be a statically typed version of Mathematica designed from the ground up? I think the answer to that is no. But for the work that we're doing on the compiler, there absolutely is a way of doing type specifications using the typed wrapper. And you learn from that what an extremely bad idea it would be to try to impose static typing on the flexibility of the language that we have. It's actually, I mean, it's interesting what you can do with static typing. And yes, the things that you get can be compiled blindingly fast, but there's an unbelievable number of weird things that, where basically the way you learn that it's a bad idea is by seeing how complicated the type expressions get for even fairly simple things. Mystiak is asking about UI UX improvements. Yes, but not for this meeting. That's a different topic, completely different set of people. I thought we had a dark mode. Do we not have a dark mode UI? I'm sure we do because I've seen people using it. I don't know. Wrong group of people here to probably discuss that.
That actually could be, I mean, we do have one or two of those in the function repository. Whether they've come up for promoting, I don't know.
Okay, fair enough. Okay. I recommend, by the way, people who want to think about types, think about the null list and consider its type. And then start thinking about all the things you do with something like that. And
or our vararg functions.
Oh yes, it's another joy.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, they have some very interesting new ideas, by the way, about how to kind of turbocharge the compiler and the compiler effort using essentially combinations of compiler ideas and UX ideas. Anyway, coming to another meeting soon. Reminds me, you should perhaps be in that meeting, Jose. There's a sort of compiler summit meeting coming up.
Okay.
Maybe Devin could make sure to take that note. Okay.
Yep.
Yes, well, thanks.
Got it.
Okay. Copy definitions. Interesting and weird.
It's the sort of thing, though, that we, I think, already do in exposing functions that, say, lived in the Wolfram alpha or in some ARG context, that sort of thing.
What do you mean? Copy definitions. If you say the Fibonacci function and it has some memoization and so on, and what does it mean to copy definitions? Say copy F to G. Okay, you're presumably replacing the Fs that appeared on the right-hand side as well as the Fs that appeared on the left-hand side. You might be copying the memoization.
Yeah. And I don't remember offhand if it does, although I suspect it does. But I think the use case is to catch not just down values, but all other.
Well, I know, but even catching down values is non-trivial for the reason I just mentioned.
Yeah.
And it's not completely obvious to me. I mean, you have to be quite careful about scoping with those things. Quite careful, quite careful. I could imagine all kinds of weird things that could happen. I mean, I think this is sort of an interesting idea, but I'm not sure. I mean, honestly, the number of times I have missed having this function over the years is not large.
No, it has been very useful for people, if I'm not mistaken, for people who are writing, exposing internal functionality in the function repo, which is internal toolsmithing.
But why is it useful for that?
It's a clean way of slurping up definitions from some whatever internal hidden private context to into the function repository as a
Yeah, but then you statically need to have that in the source notebook. So I don't understand what good it does you. That's what I'm saying. So at runtime, look, if I've got a function f and I want it to be equal to a function g, or a function g I want to be equal to f, and one way I can do that is just say g equals f. Then every time I see g, it's turned into f.
Right.
Now, the only way that that will not be the right thing is if f and g have separate lives with different memoization, for example.
Well, why don't you check out the details and options here and maybe the scope, see if there's I see. Okay.
Copy definitions. What?
This might be ancient.
I don't understand this. Why don't we ask Rick what the story of this is?
Fair enough.
This looks weird. Symbol dependencies. That's sort of interesting. I mean, that's a low-level factorization of saved definitions in some sense.
Yep.
That seems useful to me. It seems like the kind of thing where
could even return graphs of dependencies, which would be interesting.
And what would that look like? Oh, I see what you're saying. You say every node is a symbol, right, and this is saying this symbol depends on this, 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 and this.
Right.
That would be interesting. That would be useful to people. And then the vertex list is all the symbols. Well, I mean, this goes along with tools that we want to do for the call graph. The call graph is different from the dependency graph. Right? The call graph is a execution computation story, and this dependency graph is a pure, essentially what has a value that depends on the value of what. I like the idea of trying to make a dependency graph, symbol dependency graph. Maybe we can start with that as a function repository item. Maybe somebody can suggest that to Rick. Make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. Full symbol name,
We should probably be inviting him to this meeting, by the way.
because he has so many function repository entries.
Not just that, but his background knowledge and mine are more or less complementary.
Fair enough, though that sounds like a good idea when we're going to discuss function repository promotion stuff.
Right, that's what I meant. Not in general, but for that.
Oh boy. Interesting. I mean, I hope that's not the best factoring of this. Seems like it should be an option to symbol name.
Nick, is information doing this already?
Full symbol name, like with the context?
Yes, always presenting somewhere the symbol with its full context.
Yeah, it's not the primary header, but the fully qualified name does get included.
Well, you're suggesting that it's a case of information or something.
Yeah, it's something that could be extracted from information.
Yeah, there's a full name parameter that.
So if you say information of F quotes full name.
Yep, it'll give system, or I guess in this case, global backtick F.
Well, that seems useful. It should also be, then it should be linked from the symbol name page here.
Mm-hmm.
Seems like that's a pretty decent solution to this.
Yeah.
What the heck is this? Oh, that's interesting. That does seem like a decent idea, to be able to have a context setting for toString, because that's not something we currently have. And I mean, I have no idea what context stuff it puts in. Am I making sense? Like, what context does toString imagine it is stringifying in? It's got number marks, but it doesn't have context.
Right.
And it probably should have.
You mean so that the symbols in the string are fully qualified?
That's correct. Are qualified for the appropriate context for what it says. You know, in other words, if you want to locally set a context in which the string will, in which the expression will be interpreted. Okay, this would also be an option, I would think, for the export functions that go to strings. You know, that take expressions and just write out Wolfram language source code, basically. I'm surprised we haven't run into this issue before. Am I making sense?
I'm still confused. So the symbols will gain their own current context.
Yeah, it will qualify the thing. If you think you're writing out toString for a certain current context, then symbols in that then current context will not get context, will not be qualified. But if you say, I want toString to write out, assuming that I know that no contexts are on the context path and so on, then, I mean, you know, it could have a context path option effectively.
Right.
And that would determine whether it will write out, whether it will think of itself. I have no idea how you would do that right now, how it would write itself out with appropriate context names.
Perhaps by blocking context path?
Well, yes. But that seems like a pretty hacky way to do it. And I'm not even sure you can achieve everything that way. Anyway, that's my suggestion, is that we look at the context path options for things that write expressions to strings. I don't even know how the WXF stuff works with that. How does that work? Does it maintain the context information?
I don't know.
No idea.
Okay.
Is WXF distinct from what we do for MX files from dump save?
Most definitely, yes.
Okay.
All right, we should probably wrap soon here, but let's just try and do a few others. Inline. That seems like a horrifying concept. What the heck does this even mean? What?
Ask Rick.
Hi, I just joined, but the basic idea of that is something I do often is you have with like x equals x just to insert the value of something into a held expression. And this basically is just a shortcut.
I see. That's interesting. Okay, hold on. Let me think about that. I agree that the with x equals x is totally horrifying. But what is the way really to do that? How does... Let's see. You've got an expression in which x is held. And one thing you could do would be to say slash dot x arrow whatever, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
But you want to do that executionally, so to speak, rather than... Yeah, I'm not completely... What is... Okay, explain to me the factoring of with... Okay, so this is saying... So this is the equivalent in line of x comma exper is the equivalent of with x equals x comma exper. Right. So in other words, it's releasing basically just the x's inside exper.
Yeah, essentially. It's basically, in this case, it's using the own values of x as the replacement rules for like replace all.
I understand. But basically what it's doing is it's saying, unhold, whenever I had this, it's basically saying unhold a specific, a specific symbol in an expression.
Yeah, that actually is probably a better name.
Well, I'm not sure that's the right way to do it. I mean, I mean that's a concept, though.
Although it doesn't fully evaluate it, so it doesn't.
Does it in place?
Example, does it echo?
What's that?
That first example, it doesn't echo. So it just does one replacement, like into the own values of x, but doesn't really unhold it.
Right. Look, I think getting rid of the with x equals x idiom would be a really good thing. I'm not sure if this is... I mean, okay, let's put that on the agenda to discuss that. Okay, I'm not sure this is the complete solution, but let's put that on the agenda. Okay, Devin.
Yep, I got it.
Okay, what is this? Why is this not... Boy, what is this? What's the difference between this and local session evaluate?
So this will evaluate something on a fresh kernel that has no definitions, you haven't loaded any packages or whatever. Like it's pretty useful for testing things.
It is useful. That is a good idea.
And I figured since we have cloud submit and cloud evaluate, we have local submit but no local evaluate. It seemed to make sense.
That does make sense. That does make sense. It's a good idea. So it will spawn a separate process and just do the evaluation and return the result.
Yeah, so it'll start a new kernel and just evaluate that thing, and then that kernel quits and gives you the result.
Sounds useful to me. I think we should, yeah, that's a good idea.
Is there any way of controlling which kernel you want? So if I have several versions and I want to control with which one I want the evaluation?
That probably should be done in the same way that we deal with external evaluate. I mean, what is the difference between this? Oh, I see. External evaluate takes a string. I mean, there's some relationship between this and what Jose is saying and the whole kernel connection manager thing and the WSTP server, because this local evaluate could be, oh, do this, but make sure it's on a different core or whatever else. I mean, this local evaluate. Okay, the basic point is, you know you're allowed to do it because it's on your current machine. In some sense, it's not like a remote evaluate where you have to go and authenticate on another machine and so on. Am I making sense?
Right.
Yeah.
And what does this actually do? How does it actually call the program internally, Rick?
It basically just throws some extra wrapping onto local submit. So it does use local submit and it waits for the result. It uses the task finished handler to return that.
I see. Well, let's get this in a meeting that involves Roman and so on. Who did local submit? Whose thing is that?
Was that Constantine?
Maybe. Let's get this in a meeting with those guys. But it looks like a good thing. Fail on message. That's the same thing as confirm quiet.
Yeah, same idea. So this might
What's the
be
difference?
obsolete, but I think one of the things we were talking about is maybe it would be nice to have an option to something like confirm or confirm match to also check for messages. So you don't have to.
But confirm quiet does check for messages. Confirm quiet does fail if there's a message. So you'd be saying confirm quiet of confirm match, whatever. So you're saying a messages option to confirm match.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember what.
That seems unnecessary. I mean, I think you can just say confirm quiet of confirm match.
Yeah, this one might just be considered obsolete.
Okay, if that's the case, we should make sure it references, right, confirm. Yeah, it doesn't reference confirm quiet, and it needs to.
I can update that one to mention.
Okay, once unless failed. Well, that's interesting. That's interesting. That's a confirm once type thing. Once.
Yeah. If I were naming it now, I probably would have put confirm somewhere in the name.
Okay, so let's think about how that works. I mean, if you say once of confirm, actually, that's an interesting way to do it. I mean, to just have the idiom of once of confirm, and then it just doesn't. You see what I'm saying? I think once of confirm would just do the right thing.
Yeah, if you have the enclose outside of the once, it would work.
Right, enclose once confirm. Seems like a good idea. I mean, that seems like just an idiom that we should promote in once and then confirm. I hadn't thought of it, but it's a good idea. I don't think it needs its own function. I think there are enough different things that you want to do if it fails and so on that you really don't want to have a separate function for that. I mean, there's nothing wrong with it in the function repository, but I think that's a readable form. What the heck is this? What is the point here?
It's a pretty printer of sorts, a layout, you know, how it does the layout, I think.
It's like input form, but it adds spacing and line breaks and all that.
Well, that's interesting. So what's the relationship between input form and Brenton's recent kind of, I mean, why doesn't input form get the same capabilities as Brenton's code formatter?
Because it's ancient and nobody really wants to dive into that code base.
Right, but the fact is that whatever Brenton's code formatter is doing could intercept the string being generated by input form, and I just hadn't thought of this. I mean, input form should get some it's even possible that input form by default should use a code formatter. Well, maybe it does. It just uses a very unairy code formatter, right?
I think that's a correct statement, although it does insert spaces before and after infix operators, for example, or at least some of them.
Okay.
And in
Anyway,
list,
I mean, I think the bigger question is, what is the relationship between input form and code formatting?
I think it's pretty much as you both have said. One is sort of a more primitive version of the other.
All right, but then
30-year-old.
input form is 34 years old. I had not thought of this, but I think we should raise that in the next code assistance discussion.
Sure.
Okay. And I don't know what heuristics Rick is using here for readable form and how they relate to what Brenton is doing. Do you know?
This is stuff I wrote a long time ago, and I barely remember what it does.
Okay.
I mean, one possibility is just to bring it to Brenton's attention.
Yeah.
To see if he has comments like, "Oh, I can do this better now," or "Oh, this is some ideas I need to use myself," or whatever.
I agree. Makes sense to me because we've got all these kinds of issues. Yeah. Yes, these are interesting.
He seems to be a good person to comment, at least,
right, but this is an interesting option. That's an interesting option. He's got that option. That's an interesting one he doesn't have. So yeah, I think that's a good place for this. Contains queue. I thought we already had a contains queue.
Not really. We have the contains family, but in the end we never added this.
Would this fit in there? This infinite depth contains or not?
It seems like it's a length of cases with -1, greater than 0.
No, I think this is not free queue, right?
Not what?
Not free queue.
That's true. It is just a pattern thing. So yeah, not free queue.
Look, I find it super hard. I have to say, even after all these years, every time I use free queue and member queue, I have to look up their argument order.
Yeah.
Well, the main thing is that member queue is looking at first level, while free queue is looking at all levels.
Indeed.
And that's why there is the need for this contains queue, which would look at all levels.
So it's a member queue.
Sugar, but it's useful.
Yeah, it is useful if people can really understand what's going on.
Well, it's going to be a bit confusing with respect to member queue.
I agree. Okay, let's put this on our list to discuss in another ILD meeting. The free queue, member queue, question mark, contains queue. Just the fact that it's so hard to remember these argument orders, and perhaps that's a sign of bad naming.
Yeah, but we're not going to change those argument orders.
Obviously, we're not.
So contains queue, I will say absolutely must have the same ordering as free queue.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So there's really not a whole lot to discuss here. We're constrained.
Well, I understand, but the question is, do we want it, and is the name sensible?
Okay, fair enough.
Okay. Eliminate lists. Why isn't that? Oh, I see. That's basically the equivalent, the select version of delete cases, this discard thing.
Yes.
Right.
Exactly.
It's a great function repository entry.
Deselect, you could call it. Well, not really.
It doesn't seem critical. I mean, anybody
It's something though that people have asked for a very long time, and for exactly that reason. You've got cases and delete cases. You have select and what?
case what?
We don't is the thing.
No, I understand. Well, okay, what would it be? Delete select?
That's why I was saying deselect, but
Yeah, but it would make more sense to call it delete select.
it might.
Have people asked for this?
Once upon a time, Teo Gray did. It's something I have on rare occasion wanted, but it has come up.
It's a little bit of a weird name. Look, I agree that saying delete everything that isn't a number. But you can also say select everything that is a number. I mean, it's a question of putting not in front of the predicate.
Useful to like delete failure queue expressions.
Wait a minute. But there's also delete missing and so on, which goes with this, which is in a sense a version of delete select. Sorry, what were you saying, Rick? I mean, there isn't a delete failure yet, is there?
No, I don't think so. But like, that's an idiom that I found really useful is select, not failure queue a lot.
Yes, I agree.
What about, maybe it's a stretch, but we have select. What about remove?
We've already got remove. It means something completely different.
Right.
It's this, right? Is what
Yes, we do. Yes.
Okay. Let's see. Dumbstick on the live stream is asking, isn't contains queue KMP? What is KMP? Substring such. This isn't strings, this is expressions. There's a completely different string contains queue is a completely different function. And that indeed just does substrings. Well, I think this question of a delete failures is sort of interesting. And probably should be looked at, because I can imagine something that somehow connects with confirm. Like, for example, is there a way of saying I have this list and everything? I mean, I suppose I could say something like in my list. Yeah, I don't know how to do that. I mean, in other words, given the list, anything that did something funky, generated a message or otherwise, do you get what I'm saying? It's sort of a confirmed cases or something. Given a list, that's not right. It's not right. It's not right. It's not right. That's not right. But, it's like given a list, I want to keep only those elements where nothing funky happened.
Right. So something that happens with delete missing is that typically when you want to delete a missing, you also are worried about things around. So these additional arguments to delete missing are important and not easy to use, I would say, sometimes.
I have to say, I think that the name discard really does have the right connotation.
Possibly, yes. Oh boy. Yeah, that's not friendly. I mean, possibly there should be some named arguments.
Right. So this is the sort of thing in which, for example, imagine that during a geo operation, a latitude came up as $ failed. How do you say, I want the whole geo position removed?
I understand. That's a good topic. Let's talk about that. Okay.
Yep.
It's sort of confirm meets or something meets, confirm is an execution time story. This wants to be an expression structure version of confirm. Right? And I think that makes sense, that analogy?
I think so.
How should that work? Ask Christopher. He might have an idea about this.
Okay.
All right, we should really wrap up here. Okay, well, I think this is a very useful process, and let's go on next time, I think.
Okay.
Okay, great. Thanks a lot, guys. Thanks to folks on the live stream. See you another time.